started, I'd like to recognize the new committee members. I know we've got a few new faces around here. For those of you who are new, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, we'd love to just know who you are, which locality you're representing.
I'm Lori Hayes. I'm Lee Hill District in Spotsylvania.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm Monica Gary, and I'm representing the Aquia District in Stafford County.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Glad to have you here. I believe that's it for...
Well, Meg is new.
I'm Meg Bomke. I represent the Falmouth District for Stafford County, but I was on FAMPO at one point, then I kicked myself off, now I'm back.
What did you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
Button for punishment. We appreciate it.
What do you think?
All right, now it's time for the roll call and determination of quorum. Ms. Chandler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From Spotsylvania County, Tim McLaughlin. Chris Yakubowski.
Here.
David Ross.
Here.
Kevin Marshall. Deborah Frazier. Lori Haynes.
Here.
From the city of Fredericksburg, Jason Graham.
Here.
Matthew Kelly.
Here.
Tim Baruti.
Here.
Mark Whitley. From Stafford County, Meg Bomke.
Here.
Monica Gary.
Here.
Crystal Vanucci.
Here.
Pamela Ewan. Darnell English. The representative of the Secretary of Transportation, Miss Marcy Parker.
Here.
Michelle Shropshire.
Here.
From the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, PRTC, Rob Schneider.
Here.
Joe Stainsby. From Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, Mr. Ivan Rucker. From Federal Transit Administration, Tanya Holland. From the Commonwealth Transportation Board, Cedric Rucker. From the Virginia Department of Transportation, VDOT, Susan Gardner.
Here.
Stephen Haynes.
Here.
From the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, Todd Horsley.
Here.
Sierra Williams. From Fred Regional Transit, Jamie Jackson.
Here.
Aiden Court. From Caroline County, Jeffrey Seeley. And Jeffrey Black. From King George County, Ann Kupka.
She is no longer. I'm the only FAMPO member, and that's Kathy Binder.
Perfect, thank you. And from the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, CTAC, Mr. Hank Sharpenberg.
Here.
Matthew Rowe. The roll call has been conducted and a quorum is present.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler. At this time, we're looking for approval of the January 24th Policy Committee agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing motion and second in discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Time for public involvement. Comments and questions for members of the public are welcome at this time. Staff will also read comments submitted by the public prior to the meeting. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak at this time? Do we have any written comments?
The Chair, at this time, we don't have any written comments from the public.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the consent agenda.
Chair, I'll move the consent agenda as submitted.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
I'd like a friendly amendment because I need to abstain from the meeting minutes. Could we pull those separately?
All right, pulling 7A.
Yes.
All right. Do we have a second to move consent agenda, removing item 7A?
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 7A, approval of November 15th Policy Committee meeting
So
minutes.
moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain, Meg Bomke.
Thank you.
Monica. Yeah, she'll abstain.
And Ms. Gary. All right, thank you. Motion carries.
You would need to abstain because you weren't at the.
Right, yes.
3 abstentions. All right. All right. Moving on now to the FAMPO Administrator Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go through the slides as quickly as I can, but first to tell you, the draft FAMPO Long-Range Transportation Plan is finally done and is available
Presentation.
for your comment. It's available for your comments, and we're going to be asking you later in the program to approve it for public comment. There it is. My slides I'll go through as quickly as possible. I'm going to revisit the FAMPO vision, but in a much abbreviated session just for particularly new members and those who've returned to FAMPO, the infrastructure bill, early buses, and a couple of other items. Next slide. So we just wanted to remind you about this, those who are new members, just to encourage you to advertise that Fred Bus now runs an hour earlier in the morning, and it's a longer hour on most of their routes. So the opportunity is there for people to get to work using the bus. Previously, under previous leadership, the Fred Bus, sometimes they only turned the key on at 8:30 in the morning. And if you had to be at work at 8, it was pointless. Now, they're starting most of their routes an hour earlier to enable people to get to work. Please tell your jurisdictions. Next slide. This is a question I asked at the last FAMPO Policy Committee meeting, but for the new members, I want us to ask the question, what is the future transportation and planning vision for our region? What do we want the future to look like? Next one. So, what would a good outcome be 50 years from now if we achieved what we want to achieve? What would it look like? Would we have reduced congestion with more businesses and more population? Would there be environmental improvements? Would there be lifestyle improvements? Affordable transportation? Would there be faster transit? Would there be safer roads and sidewalks? When I arrived at FAMPO, I was told by members of this policy committee, we've realized we can't build our way out of a congestion crisis. So my question is, what are we going to do about that? What are the alternatives? Next slide. So as we think about this, I just highlighted some mega trends in transportation for the members to think about in November, and I'm just giving you the shortened version of it now. Gas tax is going to be insufficient to cover highway construction and maintenance. It hasn't grown, and it's in fact shrinking relative to the amount we need to spend. Electrification of vehicles will ultimately be the demise of the gas tax, and most vehicle manufacturing companies are buying into electric. They're planning for electric, they're designing and building electric, they're selling electric. A couple of months last year, the Ford Mustang, the electric version, sold more than the gasoline version. Not every month, but a couple of months. So if even sporty vehicles are selling more electric, the demise of the gas tax is coming. Secondly, we need to think about smart technology to make better use of our facilities. Instead of laying more asphalt, more what we call tarmac, look at synchronizing traffic lights, regulating speed, monitoring dangerous and criminal behavior with technology to increase the use of what we already have. Technology to manage large transit fleets, getting the buses to run on time, the trains to run on time, and improving the customer experience and wayfinding technology. There's lots of technology that can be used to get more out of what we have in terms of roadways and train lines. Next. Electric vehicles of all kinds are the future, whether we like it or not. The driver of this is going to be price. Electric vehicles are getting cheaper. Each generation of electric vehicles are cheaper than the previous generation. And the same is not happening with internal combustion engines, gasoline-driven vehicles. They're not getting cheaper. Electric vehicles are getting cheaper, so eventually that's going to meet, and you will see the shift to electrification. Automobile manufacturers are betting on electric. That's why we know what the future is. They wouldn't invest money if they didn't think what's going to happen. Ride-hailing is betting on what I call an unsustainable future. This is an opinion, but it's based on some research, right? Ride-hailing companies are essentially loss-making. Investors will want a return on the investment that hasn't materialized in a big way. Ergo, ride-hailing will either shrink. This is the trade-off. You either shrink the amount you do, or you put the price up. And guess what we're reading in the New York Times and the Washington Post? Ride-hailing prices have gone up double, right? Because it's unsustainable. You either got to put the price up or you got to take less trips to eventually get to a break-even point. Next one. Autonomous vehicles will be a mixed bag of success and some failure. Manufacturers keep delaying the launch of fully autonomous vehicles because there's some technical difficulties in making it work. A computer cannot determine why obstacles are in front of your approaching car or what the likely outcome is going to be. Legal liability concerns make this system difficult to finally fully implement. We're going to end up with driver-assisted vehicles a lot more quickly than we're going to get fully autonomous vehicles. Transit is also evolving. In Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America, transit is seen as a public service or a public good, not a social service and not a liability. And transit is going to also electrify. There are issues with batteries and so on, but it will electrify. Next one. Land use is evolving. The trend is towards mixed use rather than separate housing. In the old days, the idea was get the factory away from my house. I don't want the restaurant with live music near my house. So we zoned everything very separately. Factories there, restaurants there, housing there. We're moving towards mixed use all over the world. Globally, it's a trend. Mixed use is what's happening in the current trend. Dense nodes, a node being a geographical area where things collect together, connected by transit and shared use paths. Bike and pedestrian uses are increasing. There's a resurgence in people using bicycles, in bike sharing, in scooter sharing, and what they now call personal mobility devices. Used to be just a bike, right? It's a business. Docked and undocked bikes. Biking is a form of transportation now in some areas and not just recreation. Next slide. That's the end of just all of that. And I just wanted to quickly, in a very quick snapshot, give you a short summary of what I talked about last year in November, just to get you thinking about what the purpose is of regional planning and regional transportation planning for us here in Fampo. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, $550 billion of this is new spending. The balance is a lot of old spending that's been rolled over in a reauthorization bill. Do you remember the FAST Act? Well, the BIF includes the new version of the FAST Act money. So it's a rolling over of all that money plus new money. The Commonwealth is expecting $10 billion in new funding for infrastructure-related projects. Next slide. The blue is the national figure, $110 billion to repair roads and bridges. Virginia is expecting $537 million for bridges and $7 billion for road projects in the state. $10 billion for public transportation and transit. We're looking at $1.2 billion in new transit funds in Virginia. Next slide. $65 billion for high-speed internet connectivity. We think $100 million for the state. $55 billion for clean drinking water and elimination of lead pipes. Our cut will probably be around $738 million. $25 billion for airports. We think $386 million for Virginia. Electric vehicle infrastructure, that's largely charging stations for your Chevy Spark or your Tesla. And we think $106 million over 5 years will come to Virginia. Next slide. $15 million to help with wildfires and $21 million to protect against cyber attacks, I beg your pardon. And then we will also get 3.5, well, not Virginia specifically, but weatherization of the electrical grid. I think that's it. No, it is Virginia. Thanks. Next one. Just the color threw me off for a second. How does it affect Fampa? Allocations were approved by the CTB on the 12th of January for new funding for this year, but we don't know what the breakdowns are per region, per MPO, per jurisdiction, right? That will come in time. Virtually all the line items have increased, sometimes a tiny amount, sometimes a very substantial amount. I think there was one line item I saw which really didn't increase. But most line items are set to increase, and it's likely that we will get higher CMAQ and SCGB funds, and the funds that the MPO uses to run itself, that FAMPO uses. We think there's going to be increases. We don't know the amount. We will only know that when the breakdown is done through the state of Virginia, and that through VDOT structures, through DRPT structures, etc. Next slide. So, we've been asking this question here at the office, well, I certainly have been. What is going to be the impact of the 2 new bridges and the additional 6 lanes on the I-95? Okay? We don't know yet. I don't think, and VDOT can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have cameras that are separating the traffic out yet that can do traffic counts. I don't think so. So what we've done is try to estimate what's likely to happen using streetlight data. Now remember, these are counts of vehicles that got on and off the highway at all the different off-ramps and on-ramps last year, so before the bridge opened. So it may not be exactly like this as a result of the bridge opening. It's a guesstimate. But the through traffic, you can see 62%. When you're going southbound and local traffic, about 37. Northbound, 69, and a local 30. These are approximate numbers. So we think that what's likely to happen with these 2 new bridges opening and the new lanes is that you're going to get 30-something, 60-something splits between the through traffic and the traffic that comes locally. But we don't know yet. We've got to wait till all the lanes open and the bridges open, and we can actually do an actual count before we find that out. Next slide. Train stations. Fredericksburg train station is going to be upgraded this year, or they're going to start anyway with the construction. CSX and DRPT have appointed a team that will be on site, presumably this quarter. They wanted to move on site in December already, but there are a couple of delays. Then the kayak fraternity came up to me at a speech I was giving at the Rotary organization and said, hey, there's some structural problems with this bridge over the river. You should alert somebody. So, I mean, I hadn't seen the structural problems, so we alerted BRE, DRPT, and CSX. They carried out an inspection. But while the inspector was out, he also inspected the train station. And he then came to knock on our door here and said, hey, I need to tell you, your train station's falling apart. And we had to tell him it's not our train station, but we'll happily pass the message on. So we alerted everybody again. There's apparently a pipe that is leaking and spraying upward, causing the concrete structure of one of the station platforms to degrade, and it's got to be repaired. CSX is investigating solutions, and they will revert to us and tell us what they're going to do about it, because CSX is still responsible for maintenance until, I believe, the year 2030. After that, there's a shift to DRPT and so on. But we're talking about the station platforms. The rest of the station outside of the platforms belongs, I believe, to the city at this stage. CSX is investigating solutions, and they'll tell us. The Stafford train station upgrade was scheduled for later than that. An additional train slots have started to become available to BRE and Amtrak. We don't have details, and perhaps we should be asking BRE to give us a short presentation sometime about how they're going to make use of those slots, if they're going to make use of those slots, and what will happen to our schedules. Next slide. This was an interesting one. You'll remember we had a discussion last year about a regional transportation authority, and a number of members were very against the idea. The Chamber of Commerce published at the beginning of this year their legislative priorities for 2022. And number 2 is this. They want to request the legislative ability to establish a regional transportation authority so that the region may explore the opportunity of raising and spending dollars locally on transportation projects of importance. I highlight this for you because part of my job, I believe, is to just keep abreast of what other people are doing about transportation in our area, so that you know what's going on outside of FAMPO, outside of GWRC. Well, this is outside of us. We have no input into this, but the Chamber of Commerce is pursuing this issue, so just thought I should alert you to it. Next one. FAMPO has got one new staff member that is filling one of our vacancies. Won't you stand up? This is Becky Golden, who has got over 30 years of transportation and engineering experience. She joins the FAMPO team. Welcome to you. Glad to have you aboard. We're interviewing for a new public engagement officer, a Title VI coordinator. Remember, Stacey had the job. We're interviewing for that. We're reviewing salary scales of staff together with GWRC. We're completing updates to the congestion management process. The only appendix that is not in here for you to review is that congestion management process. There are a couple of things we still wanted to work on before we gave it to you for comment and review. And that's where you can find it on the website. Remember, it's my job to inform you. I have a federal requirement to tell you about this thing and to tell you that we monitor these numbers. So I'm officially telling you for the third time. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellis. Moving on to the action and discussion items. First up, item 9A, the variable speed limits update. Ms. Parker.
Hello. So many of you will remember that VDOT performed a corridor study back in 2019 of I-95 through the entire state of Virginia, North Carolina, all the way to Maryland. So operational improvements were recommendations that came out of that study, and the CTV approved those operational improvements back in January of 2020. Variable speed limits were one of the recommended operational improvements on the corridor. Next slide. So the portion of the corridor that was selected was from milepost 115, this is I-95 northbound, 115 in Caroline County, up to exit 130 in the city of Fredericksburg. So hopefully it's come back to you when I give you why. Some of the reasons that we selected this location were the recurring and the non-recurring congestion. Anyone, of course, who lives in the area knows that this area backs up very frequently, especially on the weekends. And this section also has higher crash rates, and of course, the crashes cause significant delays. Slide. So this is a picture of what it is. It's under construction right now. So the signs that say 65 miles an hour, they are photoshopped, actually, in this photo. But the cabinet and the barrels and that little trailer, they're all there right at this moment. Just let you know, it's not a real picture. So you will notice that the trailer on that right shoulder. And so if you go to the next slide. So during the month of November, we deployed 24 of those trailers to start collecting data so that we could analyze the data before we implemented the variable speed limit. The testing has been going very well. We're gathering lots of great data to validate the algorithm. Next slide. So sometime in February, we don't know the exact date, snow has kind of delayed it a little bit, so it'll probably be the latter part of February, we are going to implement the variable speed limits, and it'll be a soft launch. And what that means is that we're going to turn on the signs to say 70 or 65, depending on what milepost you're at, but we will not start changing the speed limits until a week after. So we'll turn all the signs on, all these static signs, which are just the plain signs that say 70 or 65, those will all be removed in that time frame, and then a week later is when we'll start activating the variable speeds. So next slide. So the public communications plan. You probably all wonder, well, how are people going to know? So on this slide, which is a little hard to read because it's in gray, and this came from the CTV's presentation 2 weeks ago, so if anybody wants to see the full presentation, they can go watch it on the CTV website. But these are the key messages that we're giving to people, and so that it's, these signs are always enforceable. That is one big thing. We get a lot of questions. State police will use mobile technology to monitor the speed limit and enforce as needed. Slowing traffic down before an incident or congestion helps everyone keep moving. So safety is going to be the big push for this. The tagline is going to be, adjust your speed when there's a need. It's kind of what it's going to be. So Let's see, when traffic and weather conditions call for reduced speed and there's a crash or work zone ahead, the electronic signs display reduced speed limits and gradually slow the vehicles down ahead of the actual congestion. So you can kind of read through what some of those are. But the communications plan, like how are we going to let people know that this is going on? Because a lot of people only travel this corridor once or twice a year, go on vacation. So some of the things we're doing, we will have a billboard up on I-95 northbound near Doswell. They will pretty much say adjust your speed when there's a need, and it'll have a website and everything that people can go to. We'll be running messages on our existing overhead sign boards all the way from Richmond up. We're getting ready to implement this, and probably during other peak periods. We are installing signs at 3 rest areas. The one on I-64 westbound in Newton County, on I-95 northbound at Carson, which is at milepost 37, down near the North Carolina line, and then I-95 northbound at Ladysmith, which is at milepost 108. We will have digital advertising that's targeting mobile devices in the corridor. So if you drive through the corridor, it's going to, and you're searching anything or looking at anything on Google, it's going to be one of those annoying ads that you have to click away. So we are doing that. We're working with Waze to have zero speed takeover ads. So when you stop, either you stop at, a gas station or rest area or something like that, or you stop in traffic. Well, I don't use Waze, but evidently there are annoying ads that will pop up when you stop on Waze, and we will have those also. We will have paid social media advertising on Facebook for certain areas, certain kind of geofencing. We will, of course, have news releases and, of course, the websites that we have, which are virginiadot.org, as well as our improved95.org websites. We'll have a lot more information on those. Next slide. So building for the future, we can use this to move Virginia forward. So we are collecting a lot of great data that is going to be used to better understand the impact of weather, incidents, and work zones on traffic. And this will help us develop predictive methods to better identify precursors to incidents, to slow the traffic down before they get there. And it will also help us with future variable speed limit deployments across the state. And then, of course, in the long term, this data is going to help us with our exploration of opportunities for connected and autonomous vehicles. So that is a brief update. The important part is this is going to go live sometime in February. So in case anybody's wondering where are we with it, that is where we are. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. If you ask me anything about the algorithm, I will not know.
Okay, just quick. When you made the presentation to the City Council, I don't know how much, it's becoming a bigger issue now going northbound, visiting a son who lives in Richmond. And we've talked about this here, is the amount of tractor-trailer traffic is increased quite a bit, both northbound and southbound, which is a major issue of speed on 95. And in the presentation we had for council, it was mentioned that VDOT was aware of this issue and would be taking appropriate enforcement steps in relating to keeping the left lane clear of tractor trailers and things of that nature. Do you have any idea where that planning is going?
So we don't enforce.
I realize that.
I did personally write to the Trucking Association about the trucks in the left lane. I did request the first sergeant to enforce more, and we did post the overhead signs. I think it was like 4 days. I can't remember what month it was in, and I've asked that to be run again to say no trucks in left lane. I have been talking to our state traffic engineering office about changing out the signs, because if you look every, I don't know how many miles, it seems like it's every 10 to me, but 10 miles or so, there's a sign that says commercial vehicles use right 2 lanes, whereas if you drive through Maryland, it's like no trucks in left lane, and it's like every single mile. So we are pursuing and looking into what is our messaging, or, we're trying to be on the, let's encourage you to do the positive, and maybe we need to look at more, do not do this. So we are kind of looking at the signs to try to keep the trucks over. But again, we are not enforcement. We can only.
Well, no, just thank you that it is being addressed. Because frankly, especially coming southbound, you hit Stafford and coming across, and the ups and downs, and they're all trying to pass each other, and it brings everything to a screeching halt. And if we could just get them out of the left lane and people had a place to go, it might help things a tad bit on keeping things moving.
Yes, Mr. Russell.
So, Marcy, it's northbound only?
It is northbound only, so we're trying, because usually the backup starts around 126, and then it starts to build up towards Thornburg, so we're trying to get those people slowed down before you get to 126 and the river.
So it sounded tonight like you're looking for data collection more than, or does it have, do you have a metrics, like this is, if we get this metric back, we're successful, or is it more data collection they're doing?
No, they do have metrics, and that was in the CTV presentation, but it's more reduced crashes, reduced congestion, things like that are the metrics that we're looking for.
And what time period will you go back to CTV or to us with those metrics to say we were successful with this or it was a flop?
So I believe they're gonna look at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and then whenever the commissioner says from that point.
That could be interesting to see that.
He is personally involved in this project and is being briefed monthly as to how it's going.
All right, okay. Any other questions for Ms. Parker? All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item 9B, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, the CMAQ and Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, STBG Project Selection Process.
Now action items. If you don't mind, I'm going to take this mask off and try and keep 6 foot away from Chris over here, because with my accent, I know it's a little more difficult for some of you to understand me, so I'll take the mask off, but I'll put it back on before I go sit down. CMAQ and STBG process, you'll remember, those of you who were on the committee, we came to the decision last year that it was time to review this process. It is more than 10 years old, and it's really, in some places, constructed in a universe where everybody was always nice and helping each other out. And actually, when you're arguing over budgets and who gets which project approved, it can get a little testy. So this process was begun to try to tighten up the loopholes and make it clearer to everybody exactly how we were going to prioritize projects. The TAC was asked to start the process. They elected a subcommittee of the TAC that met on those dates to workshop what the new methodology should look like. And a special TAC meeting was convened in December to go through all of those recommendations again. We built consensus around the planned annual cycle, the application limits, the scoring measures, and allocation steps. We are proposing that the cycle would begin every year in early fall, giving us a longer application window and giving us a more rigid screening process and more time to do the scoring and to get feedback from the TAC and so on. Application limits, I'll get to this in a minute. There's an ongoing discussion about this section in the scoring. Measures needed to be clearer, more transparent, measurable, and more objective, and I think we've achieved that. And we wanted to give really prescriptive guidance on allocating the available funds based on the mode and the score, etc. So trying to tighten up the language, trying to get rid of the ambiguity and the space for fighting and arguing in the policy itself. The subcommittee and TAC have not reached consensus on one item. So the rest of the policy that you have in your packs and which we have available tonight, there is complete consensus among all jurisdictions and among all the role players at the TAC on all of those items except one, and that's this one. And this one, if I can explain it quickly to you, is how many projects each jurisdiction is allowed to submit in the call for projects each year for staff to score. And remember, there's no limit on how many you submit, but there is a limit on how much money we have available to allocate. So, you know, if you want to put 100 projects in there, fine, and give them each $10, you're never going to build anything because there's only so much money every year. So that's the one limit. The other limit is staff, and there are only 6 of us in total, currently. We have 1 vacancy. And 2 of those are part-timers. So we have to score every single project. So there's a limit on the amount of staff time in the period available to score every single project, and there's a limit on how much money you've got anyway. So even if you gave us 100, even if we spent a whole year scoring them, you would never fund 100 of those projects every year because it would be meaningless. You'd give them such a tiny amount of money, it would be pointless. So this is the area where there is a disagreement. The rest of the policy, there's complete agreement on the TAC. Staff have suggested one way to resolve this is to give each jurisdiction 5 applications in total. So there are 3 jurisdictions. Remember, this is a FAMPO product. So there are 3 jurisdictions, the 2 counties, Spotsylvania, Stafford, and the city of Fredericksburg, and that we give the other agencies like FRED or BRE or whatever agencies are applicable, 3 applications. With option 1, you would allow the jurisdictions or the agencies to decide whether they want a bike path, a highway, a sidewalk improvement, a new bus. Option 1 says, we don't care what the project is, pick whatever project you want, you submit the project, then we will score it using the approved methodology, okay, which is a fairly objective one this time around. But you would be able to decide the makeup of those, which mode, how many items in which mode you want to submit. Option 2 was the original option that they started with. The number of applications are broken down by mode. You get 2 or 3 applications per jurisdiction for roadway projects, 2 for active transportation, that's biking and sidewalks, 1 application for transit and TDM, and then we have something for studies. Now, that there is an agreement on, is not agreement on. The only item of this proposal that is not agreed on is how many applications the 3 jurisdictions can submit for roadway projects. That's the only part of it that's not in agreement. And the argument is whether or not the population size of the jurisdiction should determine how many slots you get. And that is the rub. That's where the discussion is. Next slide. This is what the alternative was going to look like. When your population gets to over 200,000, you get 3 slots, everybody else gets 2 slots, and then those are the kind of roadway projects. For transit, it's just 1 and 1, and so on. So this is the part that is not agreed on. Next slide. This is the same thing for STGB. So what we've done this year is to break up the methodology into 2 completely separate documents. The CMAQ document, congestion, mitigation, and air quality funding, and the STGB funding. They're 2 separate documents, so the same problem occurs in both documents, where you've got to pick that number, basically. And STBG, surface transportation block grant funding, CMAQ, congestion mitigation, air quality funding. It's 2 streams of funding, for those of you who are new, that we get from federal authorities, by the state usually, and we have to allocate them as FAMPO to projects. So if you want to fix, I know Brook Road, for example, and the flooding, if you want to fix the flooding in Brook Road, you've got to get it scored as a project, designed, then scored, then sent in here, and then the TAC makes a recommendation and you all approve to put some of the money in one particular year to that project. That's how this all works. So that is the only item that is not agreed. Next slide. Final drafts are included in your pack, with or without 3.1.2, which is this one section where there isn't 100% agreement on. Now, the pack recommended that we start a call for projects this year, but a reduced call for projects, and that we largely allocate existing funding, and we give every jurisdiction 1 project this year, instead of a full range of submissions, and that we then allocate the funding that we already have to that 1 new project per jurisdiction, plus backfill projects you already have. There are a ton of projects you already have in the CMAQ STBG funding system from the past that are not at 100% funding. There are a ton of projects. You know what those projects all are. You've argued about them for years. So the money that we already have, we fund those plus one new project. New funding, we do not allocate, and instead we start in September, in the fall, with a full round where you can put in all those numerous projects per category, or alternatively 5 projects per jurisdiction, and we will then score for the forthcoming year a full complement of projects. We will then have a larger amount of funding available, including whatever comes out of the infrastructure bill, and you can then allocate a big wad of money to a full range of new projects as well as existing projects. So to simplify that, the TAC is suggesting that you give us approval to approve the new methodology, that you then issue a call for 1 project per jurisdiction for this year, because, and the reasoning is twofold. The first thing is we have a very shortened window of time because we rewrote the methodology. So instead of starting this September, October, we are only starting now because we had to first get all of this agreed between the jurisdictions, get you all to approve it. So we're suggesting, well, the TAC is suggesting, not me, that you have a modified call for projects this year for a small number of projects, use the new methodology, and backfill all your projects that are waiting for cash to finish, plus 1 new project each, and then we start in September with a full call for projects. And remember, when you multiply out the number of projects by the number of jurisdictions plus the number of state partners, we end up scoring about 30 projects, right? Some depends on who submits. Some years, some jurisdictions don't submit their full allocations. They get 3 slots and they only submit 1 project or whatever. We had that last year. So that is where we are. And we will then in February do an intake of those new projects, do the screening and scoring, present those scores to the TAC and then to you with draft allocations, and then you would have a review and vote in that funding. We can't tell you today how much new funding will be available in CMAQ and STGB as a result of the infrastructure bill, because we don't have the numbers. The CTB has just approved the big numbers. Now it's still got to be broken down by the various state agencies to give us what our specific allocation is going to be as FAMPO. We don't know what that number is. There's going to be more, but we're suggesting that we don't rush that. We do that in September. Next slide. May, we would then do the approval to get into the draft SIP, and the CTB would then approve those, and then that money would be allocated to the projects that you already have, plus the 3 new projects, and we would then wait till the next round in September to start to, and that would give us from September right through to May to do 30-some projects from you all. Next one. That's it. So what you have in your pack now are those 2 prioritization methodologies, which the TAC has sent to you. You've got Resolution 2215, approving CMAQ methodology, 2216, approving STBG methodology, and then number 3, we're asking you to approve a modified call for projects so that we can advertise to the jurisdictions to submit their projects for this year. I've got Jordan also online. If you have any highly technical questions, she's helped us with drafting of the actual documents. But Mr. Chair, it's over to you. I seek your guidance on what you, as a committee, feel we should do.
Thank you, Mr. Allis. I do have a question. Given the disagreement or maybe just a lack of consensus on Section 3.1.2, I was hoping you could provide some concrete options that we could, if you could bring up that item.
Just go back in there.
For motion.
Yeah, they're in the slides here. So over here, you have option 1 was the staff recommendation saying give everybody 5 applications and they can decide whatever they want to do with them. They can make them all roadways. They can make some roadways, some active, whatever, and plus 3 for the others. Option 2 is what you see over the slide with those numbers. Just pull up the next page with these numbers for CMAQ, and next slide, this number for STBG. The black ones nobody's fighting about. The red ones are where the disagreement is. And so for CMAQ and STBG, there are these 2 numbers. And I'm not I mean, it's your decision as a policy committee, nothing to do with us. We just bring you recommendations and then you decide. I'm not certain that another 4 rounds through the TAC is going to resolve whether it should be 3 or 2. Remember, this is not the number of projects you're going to give money to. This is the number of projects we're going to score. And then the top ones are going to get the money. So the one at the bottom is not going to get the money anyway, even if it's 100 additional ones at the bottom. They're not going to get any money because we won't have that kind of money available. So it's a question of how many projects can you submit and how many do we score. Those are the options. Those 3 slides give you the options. And there are 2 options. The 2 options are either give everybody 5 plus 3 or give option 2, which is you have to decide about these.
Population break.
And it's only for roadway that there is a.
We get it, you want 1 minute.
All right, Mr. Ross.
So one of your options was also to approve it without 3.1.2 in both of those. What would be the problem delaying that to give staff a little bit more time to work through that with the CTAC and the county staffs and city staffs? Would there be any issue? I think it was one of your options.
So it was stated as one of our options, yes. We have no urgent crisis if you don't approve 3.1.2 in either form. We do need you to approve all the rest, because we're not in a position to score projects without a methodology, right? Because, let me just clarify, assuming that you agree to the modified call for projects, which only allows 1 project, and that's not a roadway project. So assuming that is what we go with, then you don't need to approve this. However, if you reject that and you say, no, we want a full call for projects, then we can't move forward without this because we have to score them somehow. So when you send us a roadway project, we have to know how many roadway projects you're allowed to submit. So if you exclude roadway projects and do what the modified call project suggests, then we don't need this. Then we can delay this and you can discuss it some more. However, it doesn't seem to me, private opinion here, that the TAC is making progress on this one controversial issue because there isn't agreement between jurisdictions on that.
What time frame would you need 3.1.2 determined if we tabled that section tonight?
If you do not need to submit roadway projects, this submission, then I can hold off of that for a couple of months. I don't have to have it for another 2-3 months. Okay. If you agree to the modified projects. Just bear that in mind, those 2 things are linked. If you decouple them, then I have to have this as well.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
Let's step back. I guess my first concern is looking at option 1 and 2. I can understand a little bit of the push for option 2 because I know that some of federal jurisdictions are really looking at making improvements to the secondary road system. Long term, we've already said that we're going to need maximum flexibility because transportation is changing, and I'm concerned about making a short-term decision and not looking a lot more long-term on the issue of you only do this many road projects, this many this. I'm surprised in the other aspect of it because we've had jurisdictions here who basically says we don't want FAMPO telling us as individual jurisdictions what we can and cannot submit for projects. So that brings me to the fundamental question of, 1, what is the rationale for what was the rationale provided for option 2? And when you say that the TAC could not come to, are you saying they cannot come to a consensus? I mean, obviously there's a majority and a minority because there's only 3 jurisdictions. So where is the balance in the discussion and what is the rationale for the option?
One jurisdiction feels very strongly that we should have population-determined number of roadway projects. The other 2 seem to not currently share that.
Okay, but what's the rationale for that option?
So the feeling is that certain jurisdictions are larger and their population size should determine that they get additional slots to submit projects because they have a larger population, more land area to cover with roadway projects and that kind of thing. I mean, the counter to that from the other side is that you actually don't get those projects. You just get a slot to suggest a project. You don't actually get the project.
All right, so, Ms. Baumke?
So help me, I'm sitting here, I'm talking to Chris. Nobody has population greater than 200,000, so.
You will eventually get there. Remember, this is probably gonna be here for another 10 years, this policy, so.
Oh, I gotcha, okay.
But I didn't pick these numbers, right? This is a tax decision. I did not pick the numbers.
Well, it makes a little confusing. Okay, so, and then my other question is, going back to option, the one where they're delineating 3 highway projects, 1 multimodal.
So if I can just, sorry, Mr. Chair, just interrupt here, just for clarity, because I don't want there to be a misunderstanding. At least one, let's say one jurisdiction wants there to be a grading where populations below 100,000 would get, Jamie, is it 2, and populations over 100,000 would get 3. So that you would add another, she's putting thumbs up, so you would add another line in here where you would have 0 to 100,000 gets 2 in population numbers, and above 100,000 would get 3. So that there's this, which would mean 2 of our jurisdictions would get 3 submissions, and 1 of our jurisdictions would get 2. That's the proposal from one of our jurisdictions.
All right, and I hate to bring this subject up, but since kind of FAMPO has changed, and I haven't been here at FAMPO for a year or more, I know there was a lot of conversation, and maybe you could just bring us up to speed on the whole TMA, TMZ, and how all the money flows down. I thought there was going to be something regarding some additional consideration because staff are bringing some of this money in. Can you?
So Matt can tell you, in the SCBG methodology, there is a specific prohibition on certain money being used outside of the TMA. So it is included as a item there. Matt, do you want to?
It's somewhere in there, yeah.
It specifically delineates certain funds only for the TMA.
Yeah.
And this is Jordan. If I could jump in, if you scroll up in the document, Matthew.
Yep.
What page?
Up 2 pages, where the eligibility 311 eligibility applicants. So for roadway, for STBG funds, which is related to the TMA, all jurisdictions are eligible. For transit, it's the jurisdictions and public agencies that have funds that have direct benefit with the TMA. For active transportation, it's only Stafford County, and studies, it's the same rules as transit TDM.
If you see this has got to be for the direct benefit to the TMA in Northern Stafford for projects within or that service the TMA.
Wonderful.
And that's laid down in the MOU with the TBB in Washington.
Okay,
So
thank you very much.
into the methodology.
Okay.
The jurisdictions have all been through this with a fine-tooth comb in the tack. So there's no scaries in here. The only one thing they don't agree on is that, and some of the members of the TAC are sitting here, so they can chime in if I've misexplained it. There's only one thing they don't agree on, and that's the number of projects you can submit as a locality. It's taken 6 meetings. I think they're agreeing on the rest of it.
Mr. Kelly?
This is strictly on projects, and this is strictly on projects coming before FAMPO. This is not dealing with our individual locality projects, which we can put in and do anything we want with anyway. So that's why I'm trying to figure out why there's this big hiccup about reviewing and breaking up the projects. Again, if we're looking at 10 years out before this is applicable, as you noted with the population score, I think we all agree that transportation is going to dramatically change within the next 5 years, let alone the next 10 years. And it just seems to be, I'm trying to understand what the now I'm really trying to understand what the rationale for this is. So what you're telling me is staff is still recommending option 1, and 2 of the 3 jurisdictions are supporting option 1 or are happy with option 1. We're just basically dealing with something that is, again, I'm really having a hard time understanding exactly what we're trying to accomplish with option 2.
Well, let's just make the motion.
So make a motion for option 1. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
All right. Okay, well, so do we have a motion on the table?
Really quick, before we make the motion, it seems like it is controversial. My understanding is Spotsy and Stafford only actually have 2 voters on the TTAC right now, probably because of appointments lagging. And I'm recommending that we pass it without 3.1.2, both of them, just gives us more time.
Well, I don't have a problem.
It's the tax, not the CTAC.
Okay, tax, sorry.
Well, are there, okay. All right, let's go.
Well, the issue, frankly, the issue is on the second option, we can do that farther on down the road and doesn't affect anything one way or the other. So if we want to get this done and be clean about it, we put in option 1, but we go along with the staff recommendation with regards to the current project situation and just move it on. So I'll make the motion that we approve it with option 1 on both items.
There's a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I mean, if there's concerns about it, I would like to hear them, because again, it's...
The Chair, when you put the vote, if
We will call for roll.
it pleases the group, my suggestion is that you approve it with either of those 2 options, but you approve 1, 2, and 3 together, because it's just going to waste your time if we do them one at a time. But
So a friendly amendment to the motion?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so the current motion is to approve items 9B1, 9B2, and 9B3 together with option 1 involving section 3.1.2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Nay.
Nay.
All right, ask for a roll call. Yep.
we can do that if we wish.
Yeah, it's better we do it that way.
Jordan, if you call the roll, please.
I just wanted to wait
Yes.
to make sure.
From Spotsylvania County, Chris Yakubowski,
Aye.
David Ross, Lori Haynes.
Nay.
From the city of Fredericksburg, Jason Graham,
Aye.
Matthew Kelly,
Aye.
Tim Baruti.
Yes.
From Stafford County, Meg Bomke,
No.
Monica Gary,
Aye.
Crystal Vanucci.
Nay.
From the representative of the Secretary of Transportation, Marcy Parker.
Aye.
From Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, PRTC, Bob Schneider.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Chandler.
Thanks, Jordan. You can record those.
All right, moving on to item 9C, FAMPO Regional Studies.
Thank you. Just a quick presentation. And again, I suggest you take these together if you wish, if it pleases the group. There's 2 studies, the East-West Mobility Study and the Bcr Trail Crossing Study. The East-West Mobility Study, most of you have heard about it before. For the new folks, it's a Fanpo study, and we would like to now hire a consultant to do the phase 2 part. And the study is to look at, I'll show you what's involved in that in a moment. The Bcr Trail Study, there was an item approved in your CMAC STC allocation for a PE study and engineering study of the 2 bridges on the Bcr Trail crossing Route 1 and Route 3. What's being added now is the potential crossing of the I-95, either a tunnel under or a bridge over or some other form of crossing of the I-95. And we're now prepping these projects. They will lead to smart scale applications, TAP applications, commuter choice applications, FDA transit funding if necessary, and other funding sources. So these studies lead to funding. The reason for new members why we do the studies is that often when they score your application for funding, they ask you to confirm whether or not this particular item is recommended in a study or has had engineering work done, and that increases your score to get funding. Next slide. The East-West Study is looking at 13 roadway corridors for future accessibility and congestion problems. We're looking at the long term to 2050. which roads in your jurisdictions are going to be congested between now and 2050, and what can we do about them? We picked the 13 most important ones. 7 of those will be taken to smart-scale readiness so that you can apply for funding. Then bike and pedestrian, we have 5 bike and park projects, taking projects to smart-scale readiness again, access to the train stations. Transit, we're looking at 2 large transit projects, one high-capacity transit trunk route, and a new transfer center, possibly in Stafford, at the new Stafford Downtown Center. We are then looking at additional high-level analysis for those other long-term projects, which are not going to be ready for smart scale next year. You'll see there's 13. We make 7 ready, and the other balance, we do further study so that in future you can apply for smart scale projects for those as well. Next slide. So the Bcr study is going to look at 3 crossings, the I-95, Route 1, and Route 3. Remember, Spotsylvania has built sections of the Bcr Trail in Spotsylvania. The city has built sections of the Bcr Trail in the city, but there's some hurdles to connecting this all up. It was submitted that we have the tunnel as part of this round of smart scale, and VDOT said to us that not enough engineering work has been done to prepare that project as either a tunnel or a bridge over the I-95 to get it ready for smart scale. So we need to do some engineering work, and this study will do the engineering work in order to make that ready for a smart scale project and to help us decide, is a bridge, a tunnel, a carrier pigeon, what is the best way to do this, and what will it cost, and should we do this, in what way, etc. So those 3 crossings are going to be looking at. Next one. The cost of the East-West Study Phase 2 is $301,000. The tunnel under the I-95 plus 2 bridges is $107,000. We already have some funding. We have $40,000 in 5307 funding. We already have $125,000 in HIP funding for the East-West Study. The BCR Trail, the city already has $75,000 of STBG funding, and it seems that the city would be prepared to allow this to be folded into a slightly larger project, which would also look at crossing the I-95. So that's already approved. Now, we don't need you to take action on that money, it's already done. It's the shortfall that we need you to take action on. Next slide. So the shortfall is $136,000 for the one and $32,000 odd for the second one. The TAC has looked at these projects in minute detail, and I worked with the 3 chairs of the TAC to look at consultants. We have asked consultants to use costing. We've argued with them about their costing. We've asked them to change their costing, numerous rounds of that, and we've come to what these numbers are, which is substantially less than the first quotes we got. I'm going to tell you. Next slide. Okay, so that's what we're asking for with these projects. In your pack are documents related to that, including the resolutions to approve the funding, then also to direct a public comment period, that we need to modify the UPWP to enable us to do this. Remember, we don't spend money if it's not listed in the UPWP. And then to execute a contract with VHB for the Phase 2 of the East-West Study, and execute a contract with Michael Baker to execute the Virginia Central Railway project. And when you think how much you spent on the Lafayette study, you'll see this is very good value in terms of what we're getting out of this. Mr. Chair, over to you. I'll take any questions if anybody has additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. So are there any questions on these items, Ms. Manucci?
One question. So can you remind me on this study, does it study the overpass on I-95 on Garrisonville Road, Route 610?
Matthew, can you pull up the list of roadways that are on the Eastward Study, the 13 roadways? It's on the website, so it should be quite easy. We'll pull up the list of roadways, and all of those roadways are in the batch.
Route 610 is covered by the study. These are
the final list at the bottom. There you go. That's the list of roadways that the technical group has
So my question is there pedestrian access over that bridge studied specifically to create pedestrian access?
So we've not specifically listed it here, but the language allows us flexibility in terms of exactly what will be put on that roadway. But the roadways, we're primarily looking at congestion. There are a number of pedestrian and bike projects also in here across the region. So we haven't specifically said on that roadway, we need you to put on a cycle path or a bridge for bikes and that kind of thing. For example, if the congested point is not at that particular, I'm shooting myself in the foot here by giving you too much information, but on that roadway, if the consultant and their engineers find that the most congested section of that roadway is not at that section you pointed out, then we wouldn't be putting in a smart scale recommendation to upgrade that section. However, if that section is going to be upgraded, we can always put a sidewalk or a bike path across there because we're upgrading that section.
I'm 100% confident that it will be.
So I don't want to publicly commit to that.
So can we just record this whole thing?
Just record it. Matthew's been recording all of these.
Make sure that makes it in the minutes next time. Ian said we'll get a pedestrian access.
Ms. Bumpke.
So looking at this list right here, one of the roads where a lot of people have wanted an overpass is Butler Road. So can you help me as a new member on FAMPO coming back? What has been done with these projects that are listed here? And why would the project that we're discussing, very viable project, how did it get moved up ahead of these? Can you help me understand?
Which project got moved up?
The one that we're talking about, the Virginia Central Railway Trail Bridge Tunnel.
Why is it not part of this project?
No. Why, how did it get pulled out of all those other projects and elevated to the point where we're doing a study on it? Are we currently studying all those off?
The Bcr Trail one?
Yes.
Okay, the simple answer is that your jurisdictions, not Stafford, but Spotsylvania and the city, submitted a request to this round of smart scale that we include a tunnel underneath the I-95 to connect the two ends of the Bcr trail.
Got it.
VDOT then said, you're not ready. You haven't done any analysis. There's been no costing. We don't know how much that would cost. We don't know how deep the tunnel needs to be. So we need to do the study to determine how big should the tunnel be? Where should it be? Is the tunnel less option? How much would the tunnel cost? And, Steve is sitting right there, and he'll give you the detail of how much we need to do to check whether we're doing the right thing with our money. So that's
I got it. Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you offline.
Absolutely.
So a couple of those were recently rebuilt. So our question is, why are we looking at Stafford, Courthouse Road? It was just 4-lane, multi-use path, the whole shebang.
So these were submitted again by the jurisdictions and workshopped over all those months with all of the jurisdictions there and VDOT as well. And the projection for the future that Cambridge Systematics has done using the VDOT travel demand model has shown all the red, and the red is where by 2050 we're going to have congestion. So we've taken where the congestion is going to be in the next 20 years, identified the roads that are going to be congested based on the travel demand model. The jurisdictions then had workshopped those roadways to talk about which ones should be prioritized in terms of finding the future. Remember, the study goes out to the year 2050. So what is going to happen between now and the year 2050? Even with whatever's been built, your VDOT travel demand model shows that's where the congestion is coming. We've included in that modeling done by Cambridge Systematics for the long-range transportation plan, building in all of the CLRP projects that are on the current approved list. So if we build all the projects we have, that you've all signed off on. That's what the map looks like in 2050. You're still going to have all that congestion. So we've listed those roads. We've been workshopped with the jurisdictions. I mean, Stephen sat through how many meetings? So we've gone over this again and again and again. And Stafford did ask for one change in the list that was proposed based on congestion analysis. And we made that change because one road was seen as too small. It was a minor road and it was removed.
I have a hard time believing though that like 17 Hills Drive in Pennsylvania is already gonna be congested in 2050 since it's under construction. And what was the year we were looking at? 2045 or 2050 for the 2040? They're projecting that in 2040. I mean, that's being said, in 5 years, that's gonna be congested.
So this is a picture from your VDOT travel demand model. So, I mean,
logically, I mean, many of those things we just rebuilt, Bragg, Fall Hill, all that stuff's been rebuilt within the last 10 years.
So remember, of those 13, only 7 are going to be picked where the most significant impact would be. So if those, for example, the impact would not be significant to do a project there, only 7 of them are going to be taken out of the whole list of 13. And if you know, the consultant who's going to have another look at the VDOT model finds that it's not a significant one, it'll come off the 13 and it will be reduced to 7, which will actually be designed for small scale readiness. Not all 13 are going to be taken for small scale readiness. And Stephen, please come to those meetings and give that input on a particular roadway. If you feel that it should not be included in the 7 that are going to be prepared for small scale, make that comment. You're going to be part of the team that makes that choice, not me. So please do make those comments. But this is literally VDOT's travel demand model.
If I may, on that, I just wanted to comment because I heard what you were saying and I understand what you're saying. But also my brain is, and I was commenting to Supervisor Bonke over here. It's because of that apartment complex going in. There are areas where like there's a lot of growth happening too. So it's not just that the road has already been worked on recently, but there's other things happening around it that I can see how some of this would happen sooner than maybe even what we're looking at.
So we have recently, with the VDOT travel demand model, revalidated all of the housing growth and the projected housing growth. Matthew spent a long time with the consultant and with all 3 of the jurisdictions staff to say, where is the housing going? Have each of these transportation analysis zones included the right number of housing units? And we had a whole validation exercise where we paid the consultant to do an additional validation exercise to make sure the housing, population, and work location data was updated. So we've updated the travel demand models data, the VDOT travel demand model. We've updated it through our consultant by validating the data.
Any further questions, Mr. Kelly?
Based on staff recommendations, I will move, we want to try to do this all in one vote. So resolution 2217 through 2220.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? So with that motion carries. All right.
Thank you very much.
Item 9D.
The long-range transportation plan, there it is in front of you, but it's also on the website. I'm going to ask Matt to show you. We've produced a page on the website with all of it electronically, so you don't need to print it all out. You can click, and we've done it by chapter, so you can pick the chapter that interests you today and just download that one chapter and read that one chapter. It's all, just scroll down, it's all there for you, including the appendices are there, except for the one I told you about, the congestion management process, which we will send to you next month. We just want to tweak that a little bit. And then these 3 are public engagement documents, which you don't produce until you've had the public engagement, so they're not available. Everything else is there by chapter, so you can download small sections at a time, read it at your leisure. The request by staff is that this body approves this document, the long-range transportation plan, which we worked on for 2 years, and my grateful thanks to every single staff member of FAMPO who spent hours of their lives producing this document. if you could submit it for public comment, then you all still have a further month to read it yourselves and bring us your comment and your edits. And if you think something should be blue, not red, or you think we've made a spelling mistake, there are 2 spelling mistakes hidden in the document, just to see if you read them.
Mr. Chair, I'll move 2221.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next
9E.
item is for Jordan, who is online, but I'll just stand here in case I need to field anything. This is the comment period to add some items to the tip, including the 2 studies you've just talked about, so we don't need to explain them again, but Jordan is online to tell you about the tip amendment. Jordan?
Yeah, as Ian discussed, it's the 2 studies that we just approved additional funding and the task orders for, as well as 7 Fred Regional Transit projects. They got a different source of funding, and DRPT suggested that they add these to the tip. So this is just a routine update, and this is going out for public comment and then approval next month.
And remember, with regards to the Fred ones, we as Fampa don't get involved in the detail of their individual projects. So I don't even really read the detail. I just take the ones that we're required to put in the tip, because the funding is not coming from us, it's coming from other sources, but we're required to reflect it in our tip because that's a legal requirement. Jamie Jackson is there in case you wanted to ask a question, but these are administrative amendments to the tip.
Chair, I'll move 2222.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. All right, item 9F, electing a Stafford representative to fill the 2nd vice chair position.
I move for Meg Bonke.
The chair, I don't need to do anything.
Well, there is a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Congratulations.
I'm joking.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Ms. Bonke. We now have 3 chairs.
And, all right, section 9, item 9G, FAMPO bylaws.
Last item. This is another controversial one. I'm sorry, I can't help it. It's not my item, but this item arose from the committee, from you all, not from me.
Way to push the blame on us.
No, we facilitate. We're facilitating this one. It was requested that we investigate amending the FAMPO bylaws. I was going to do some work on them, which I've done. Next slide. In October, the policy committee requested me to meet with your chief administrative officers from your jurisdictions to look at 2 possible amendments, to report back to the policy committee, and then the policy may decide to appoint a subcommittee if it wishes, and the goal is to approve any agreed amendments by February. That was the goal in October when we started this process. Next slide, I've done that. I've met with the CAOs. There was a previous attempt to change the bylaws September 2020, October 2020, and there were informal discussions. You never did reach agreement and you never did change the bylaws. And I've met with the CEOs, and last meeting in November, I produced the results of that discussion. Next slide. There were 2 items that you wanted me really to focus on. That is the determination of a quorum and breaking of the quorum, and adding agenda items for action on the day of the policy committee. So if, for example, tonight you wanted to add an item to the agenda, there is a question as to whether you should vote on it the same night or whether you should delay and only vote on it at the next meeting. The CAO discussion centered on those 2 items. I'm just doing this for new members. Some of you know all this already. Next one.
Yeah, yeah.
The CAOs made a rough draft proposal. The policy committee discussed those in November. And the agreement was then that localities would consult their own legal counsel as to whether those proposed amendments were good, bad, or indifferent. Next slide. I've put it again for you on the slides, and just for new members, my slides always get posted by the next morning on the website. So all of this is available to you as well. It's not in your pack. Because it's fun to see something you haven't seen before, right? So.
Oh, yeah.
This, however, all of the policy committee members have seen before. Actually, I'm wrong. This is in your pack. My slides that are not in your pack. It's those you'll get tomorrow. So this is in your pack. The red is the proposed amendment that we discussed. Option A is this, where you need a supermajority, 8 out of 11 of the current voting members to establish a quorum. But it removes that you have to have one voting representative from each jurisdiction, which is the current point of contention at FAMPO. And this, once the quorum has been established, if somebody leaves, the quorum remains. And I put here in your slides that this is a departure from Robert's rules. You need to be aware of that if you decide to go with this. Special meetings still has the one voting representative from each jurisdiction. Next slide. Option B, that we don't have that. We rather have 50% of the voting members plus one, which would constitute a quorum. We do not have the one voting representative from each jurisdiction. And again, once the quorum is established, the quorum remains till the end of the meeting, even if people get up and leave. And this is also removed from the if special meetings are called, it's also 50% plus one. Next slide. The other item was adding late items to the agenda. And here's the key phrase: items approved by the policy committee as an add-on are for discussion only for that meeting and shall not be voted on until the next meeting. Next slide. So these were other items suggested by localities which weren't specifically in my brief, but were also suggested. Advance notice of virtual attendance should not be required, one jurisdiction suggested. And FAMPO staff and VDOT should concur if an emergency item is brought before the policy committee without notice. So that's where we are today. And if any of you have consulted your legal counsel in your, mainly the 3 jurisdictions, by all means share that with us. It's not an action item that we're going to specifically do tonight, but it's just to bring new members up to speed as to what has happened, for you to discuss if your legal counsel has suggested anything, and any instruction you have for me to take it further.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly.
Ian, I guess the question that came out of our legal counsel specifically only relates to really the quorum issue. Is in reviewing it, there's a concern of whether that's a significant enough change that will require state and or federal approval to make that change. Have we taken this to FHA or Federal Highways and Ivan to take a look at this to see what he thinks? And I guess the question we would like to have answered is, does the quorum change as currently proposed require potentially a review by both the state and feds?
So, to answer your question, we have not taken it to any federal authority at this point. Second part of your question, or actually the earlier part of your question about whether this would constitute a substantial change, the language of the federal legislation that applies to MPOs and I think also the 1993 MOU, which established FAMPO, alludes to the fact that if there is a substantial change to the voting procedures of an MPO, you have to get reauthorization from the governor. So the legal question, and I'm not a lawyer, just for the record, I'm not giving you legal advice. The legal question is, does removing the need for all 3 jurisdictions to be present mean a substantial change to the voting procedures of the MPO? And that's the question a lawyer has to answer, not me. But if the answer is yes, then if you vote for this, it will officially mean we must notify the governor that he needs to have a look at this and decide whether he can reauthorize FAMPO or not. If the answer to that question, that legal question, is no, and you vote for it, then it does not need the governor's reauthorization, and I can't answer that for you in my personal capacity or my capacity as the administrator. I'm not a lawyer.
Dr. Snyder.
I would suggest getting legal counsel. I'm sure they've seen it, but get it to the Attorney General's office for a rendering first. Then no, because if you pass it, send it up, you are now actively, you could be told no, or there may be repercussions of something that you don't expect. And you don't want to ask, what's the famous phrase? Don't ask a question to a lawyer you don't know the answer to. In this case, don't send it to the governor's office unless you've heard from the different lawyers. So I'd recommend that as a procedural.
I was about to follow up on, we need to get,
it's an
Attorney General's office is the
definitely an AG opinion.
Yes. All right, yes, Ms. Gary.
Thank you. So I just have questions because I'm catching up and this is my first meeting, and it looks like there's been an attempt to change the bylaws a couple of times. And so my question is, was it the same thing were we attempting to change these things here, or were they different things in the previous attempts? Like, have we been going at this specifically for a while?
So the first attempt was before I arrived at Fampo.
Okay.
So some of your colleagues sitting around the table will know more about it than I do. During my time here, there have been some disagreements about items. There was a time when Fampo could not meet because there was such a disagreement, and there have been concerns about that. And my understanding is that the disagreements are items that were added at the last minute to the meeting that were voted on, and some people feel that the boycott of the meeting then brought Fampo to a standstill, and that shouldn't be allowed to happen again.
Okay.
But those two things are, my understanding, related. And so when you deal with the one, you're dealing with the other one. And the rest of it is before my time, so people who've been here longer than me would have to.
I'm understanding more. Thank you for that answer.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, we've not gotten to this level before. And I'll ask anybody else who's been in the room a few times if they want to. We've made changes to process and procedural issues. The big one we had last week, knockdown, drag out over is that on motions, the same jurisdiction can't second their own motion that another jurisdiction has to do it. That's the one big one I know that we had a big brouhaha about. But this one, and I'm speaking for Fredericksburg, and I'll let the others speak for themselves. The quorum issue we understand because we're the ones that were basically coming up the works. I'm going to say that. But it was primarily because we were suddenly getting hit with major changes to policy and funding that were given to us the same day of the meeting, and everybody wanted to vote on them right then and there. So, our big issue is primarily, the biggest issue for us is dealing with, if something comes before this body, we're planning transportation out for decades. It needs to be a deliberative process, and we need to do everything we can to build consensus to do it. Putting things on the agenda and voting on the same meeting is not deliberative in any way, shape, or form, and it's not a regional approach. And that is one of the reasons why we did what we did. We fully understand that there are going to be times, if we continue moving forward, that we're going to lose on votes and things are going to go another way. And so the quorum thing, we can work with you, but there is an issue of legality, whether they will or will not allow us to do that. And I think you're going to have, frankly, I think there is going to be a problem with only two jurisdictions in the room. I'm just telling you that that's probably going to be an issue. But I think for us primarily, it's if we can get that other issue taken care of, you're not going to have us. Again, we were walking and sitting down and going, oh, by the way, here we're reallocating all the funds on all these projects. We want to vote on it tonight.
I'm up to speed. I get where you're going with that. That makes more sense of the first part.
And from our point of view, the staff don't have an opinion, right? We will facilitate whatever is legal and whatever the policy committee decides. And both of those things need to be in place. It needs to be legal, and it needs to be a decision by you all. We will facilitate good, bad, or ugly, hopefully no ugly, but good or bad, we will facilitate for you what it is that you want.
Ms. Bonke.
So I would just like to say we have new players sitting around the table, and I would hope that we could all get along. We all have our own constituents, and we represent the public. And in Stafford County, our bylaws are the public has to see something twice before we vote on it, unless it's an emergency. Or we, waive our bylaws, but it's got to be public safety related or something like that. It's not something we take lightly, and I would say that we would stick by those same rules here, in my humble opinion.
So, Mr. Chair, if you guys have finished the discussion.
Actually, Ms. Gary has another comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, so this is important. This is an important item because it's catching me up to kind of the tone of this group here, what I'm walking into. So thank you for catching me up on that. It sounds like you guys have had some difficulty with, with these things. I'm sorry to laugh about it, but you know, it is what it is.
It's been better, much better in the last 12 months. We've had almost every item in this meeting unanimous for 12 months.
That's fantastic.
That's the record.
That's fantastic. Because when I looked at this and I saw the beginning of it, I thought, what in the world? Now it makes more sense. But a lot of it's problematic to me, just walking in as someone who's not really tied to any of the previous going-ons. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I'm glad to be here with you all, and thanks for catching me up to speed.
In 12 months, we had one item withdrawn because we couldn't agree on it, and we had one item where one member voted no. For the rest, we actually had unanimous decisions unless I've missed one. But so it's been going much better for 12 months.
That's awesome.
Just to give you some peace of mind.
Thank you.
Well, do we have any further comments on this item?
If you request me to do anything, you need to just give me an instruction.
Absolutely. So at this time, if anybody has, you know, particular changes, I think that they'd like to see, please submit them to staff.
Can we recommend that the draft be sent for legal review by the Attorney General's office?
I think that's reasonable. Yes. I think having the proposed changes reviewed by the Attorney General's office would be.
Okay.
Even with all the different options?
Well, I think it's understanding what the changes, especially the changes that are against Robert's rules, what the potential implications of those would be if it would, for example, trigger a, what was the word? The reauthorization. That's what I was thinking. Thank you.
I will gladly ask that question, and I will gladly submit these to the Attorney General's office and request an opinion if that is your decision.
If I might suggest, it might be a little bit easier and a little bit quicker, and I'll defer to those a little bit more familiar with our great, wonderful Commonwealth of Virginia and how it operates, but it might be worthwhile to get a hold of maybe either Tara Durant or Scott Phillips and have them direct it, because usually when it comes through the General Assembly to the Attorney General's office, you get a lot quicker and more response. It's the last time we've had to deal with that in the city, we did it through, at that time, Bill Howe did it for us and carried it through, and it just moves a little quicker. Because we're looking at bringing this back in February, that would probably be the better way to do it. I mean, pick your poison and see if their office will move it forward.
We may have to delay that. I mean, it's not costly.
Okay, I just wanted to listen to that. If we wanted to get a quicker response, that would be a better way to do it.
Regardless, let's get that up to the Attorney General's office and understand what the, you know, if the triggers are.
There's consensus I should do that, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great,
I think
do that for you.
yeah.
Now
We have a preference on who's gonna send it, Tara, Phil? I mean, Tara's technically the city's.
I
don't think it makes any difference which one does.
No. No.
Or, I mean, Ian, you could just put it in there. I was just looking at it to speed it up a tad bit.
I will copy in our state delegates.
Yeah, Tara Durant and Philip Scott.
We just have the quick items, correspondence, reports, and any comments from the chair.
Yes, item 10, correspondence. Correspondence has been provided.
There's the letter giving us feedback on this thing and the constrained long-range plan, the constrained long-range set of projects that are in here. Federal Highways, the Federal Transit Authority, and the EPA have sent us this letter, it's a joint letter, stating that they're happy with our project and that they meet the air quality conformity requirements that we're required to comply with. So that's good news for our long-range transportation plan. And then
Just the appointments.
the appointments of the new members, the letters appointing all of you are in the pack as well. We just welcome those new members, so they're all there.
Wonderful. Any staff or agency reports?
Just one comment. I've been asked by a lot of folks what's going on with CTAC. I just want to let you know that we are transitioning into an advocacy organization where we intend to go out, solicit input, provide feedback, and we're organizing ourselves into 3 sub-focus areas: congestion mitigation, mass transit, and pedestrian and driver safety. And so for those jurisdictions that don't have all of your folks on the committee, I would recommend you do that, because I intend for us to get busy, and we've already had people step forward and indicate they want to be part of that.
Chairman, there's one staff report. The Thanksgiving week you may wish to change the date of your, meeting the Thanksgiving week. Yeah, it's Thanksgiving, the meeting is the Monday before. If you're fine with that, we're okay with that, but if you wish to change it either to the week before, the week after, we're happy to do that for you, but just bear in mind that these are going to be holidays, and that is the Monday before. So do you want to change it, or the rest of the calendar you already have?
Mr. Ross?
So is there a meeting of GWRC in November?
Yes, on the 28th.
28th? Why don't you pair them up?
Well,
Yeah.
Second,
Okay. Well, was that a
is that a
motion?
motion?
Sure.
So you want us to shift it to the 28th, the Monday after Thanksgiving?
Yep.
Yeah?
Is there any discussion, any objections to that? I don't think this requires a motion.
Fine, we'll do the necessary.
All right, we'll, move it to the 28th. All right, board member and chair comments. Any board member wish to speak on any other ash? All right.
Thank you all for everything you did tonight. We really appreciate it. That's all.
Any motions to adjourn?
So moved. Check.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.